Hi, welcome to Dig Into China. I'm Dong Shang. The 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party's third plenary session concluded very quietly. The reform resolution issued by the Communist Party afterward was quite disappointing, leading to a slight decline in A-shares stock. The resolution is filled with unrealistic and impractical slogans such as simultaneously making state-owned enterprises bigger and stronger while also promoting the development of private enterprises. It also emphasizes both government control over the market and pushing for a technological revolution. These contradictory goals are neither practical nor grounded in reality. The official statements rarely address the concerns of the people and their livelihoods. However, a closer analysis reveals that everything is about how to increase taxes on the people and boost government revenue, which is very disheartening. For the general public, the focus remains on practical issues. These include 1. How the new fiscal and tax reforms will be implemented and how the responsibilities between the central and the local governments will be redistributed. 2. Whether there will be policies that genuinely increase people's incomes and address their needs. 3. Whether the Communist Party will continue to forcefully support the real estate market, any new policies that may emerge, and how they will address the housing issues faced by the population. In this video, I'll try to decipher the Communist Party's lengthy reports and translate them into plain language. I will explore what the new policy changes the CCP might introduce and how these changes could impact the lives of ordinary people. First, let's talk about the Communist Party's stance on real estate. This meeting introduced a new model for real estate development, which can be summarized in plain language as follows. The government plans to actively encourage people to buy homes, continuing to attract new investors while maintaining a cycle of unsustainable exploitation and repeated extraction from the same pool of buyers. Specifically, issues that are widely criticized, such as the prepaid pre-sale system for real estate and OPEC common areas, are likely to be addressed because they are immediately apparent to the public and need fixing. However, issues like poor construction quality leading to leaks or electrical problems after a few years are less likely to be resolved, as these problems aren't visible at the time of purchase. The principle remains to deceive buyers with the lowest possible effort and cost. For those who can't afford to buy a home, the government has a solution. They'll direct you towards affordable housing. This isn't just a straightforward rental model. It's been adapted to allow for a rent-to-own option. For instance, you can pay rent for a few years, and if you decide to buy a home later, the rent paid can be applied as a down payment. If you continue renting, the payments just keep going. Essentially, the government collects a lump sum upfront, thereby making a profit. Additionally, local governments are dealing with an oversupply of affordable housing and are struggling to fill these units. As a result, they are involved in efforts to attract people. The central government has proposed a strategy targeting rural populations. The plan is to offer some rights to those who rent or buy affordable housing. This means encouraging farmers to move to the city. If they can't afford to buy a home, they can start by renting affordable housing from the government. Once they are in these units, they can access some urban benefits such as public school enrollment for their children, which was not available to migrant workers before due to their status as outsiders, lack of housing, and inability to register their children in public schools. Farmers, seen as the final players in the real estate market, are being targeted by the Communist Party's plan to bring them into the city. The government plans to reform regulations that currently restrict the free trade of rural land. While local governments are too poor to demolish urban buildings, they can still clear rural properties. By demolishing farmers' homes and offering them minimal compensation to move to the city, the government aims to make them the lost buyers in the real estate scheme. The Communist Party's original statement is, permit the legal housing owned by rural households to be utilized through leasing, investment, or cooperative methods. Explore ways to facilitate farmers' voluntary and compensated exit from their land and housing rights as they move to urban areas. Yes, you heard it. Does this match what I'm saying? The most ironic part is that the Third Plenary Session's communique claimed the real estate reform is intended to improve people's lives and make their circumstances better. This is classic Communist Party propaganda. Whenever they plan to exploit you, they always frame it as being for your benefit, just like a con artist. Chinese people need to recognize this. Whenever something is genuinely beneficial to the public, the Communist Party always takes its share first, leaving ordinary people with nothing. The things they loudly promote are only advantageous to the party, while for the public, they turn out to be enormous traps. After covering real estate, let's discuss the fiscal and the tax reforms that were heavily promoted before the meeting. What are the details of these reforms? First and foremost, the main objective is to increase fiscal revenue, essentially to generate more money. Additionally, the reform of the consumption tax involves more than just changing how revenue is split between local and central governments. It also moves the point of collection. Now, the consumption tax will be paid to the local government where the purchase occurs, rather than being collected by the government where the product is produced and then sent to the central government. So, what impact will this have on businesses and the government tax revenue in practice? Let's use Mao Tai as an example. First, one of the primary impacts is that the producers like Mao Tai are likely to see a decrease in profits due to the shift in consumption tax collection. Previously, the consumption tax was collected at the production stage. Companies like Mao Tai would typically set up their own sales companies and sell their products to these subsidiaries at a low price to minimize tax liabilities. However, with the consumption tax now being collected at the point of consumer purchase, the tax is based on the final retail price. Consequently, the taxpayer shifts from Mao Tai to its sales company. Since sales company now bear the high consumption tax, Mao Tai will likely have to lower its factory price to help the sales company absorb part of the tax burden. As a result, Mao Tai's profits are likely to decline, which will adversely affect the Guizhou government's revenue. Secondly, provinces like Guizhou have an annual consumption of about 400 billion yuan, whereas Shanghai's annual consumption was 1.85 trillion yuan last year. Based on these figures, Shanghai could potentially see an increase of over 100 billion yuan in consumption tax revenue, while Guizhou would only gain a small fraction of that. Clearly, this round of consumption tax reform benefits economically developed cities like Shanghai the most. However, the Communist Party's goal is not to give these affluent cities more fiscal freedom, but to extract more fiscal surplus from them. Essentially, it's about ensuring that economically developed regions generate more tax revenue for the central government to control. Initially, I thought the central government was allocating consumption tax to local governments to reduce transfer payments and relieve fiscal pressure on struggling regions. However, after crunching the numbers, I realized that this isn't the case. The consumption tax reform might not boost revenue for financially struggling areas and could even reduce their other tax revenues. For example, if Mao Tai's sales and profits decline, Guizhou's government will collect less corporate income tax and value-added tax. It's unlikely that the increased consumption tax will make up for these losses. Only economically prosperous coastal cities with high consumption are likely to benefit. Therefore, the central government's true aim with the consumption tax reform seems to be to generate more revenue for itself by extracting higher consumption taxes from these wealthy regions. In China, the amount of local fiscal surplus handed over to the central government is entirely decided by the central authorities with no clear regulations. This consumption tax reform essentially allows the central government to directly tap into the wealth of the coastal regions. The central government collects more taxes from these prosperous areas and then redistribute the funds through transfer payments to support the financially struggling central and western regions. So, what benefits does this reform offer to the coastal economies of China? None at all. Coastal regions are facing extensive tax audits covering 30 years and massive fines, which are forcing many businesses to shut down. This has already impacted local government revenues. For instance, local governments in districts like Baoshan and Chongming in Shanghai are resorting to borrowing from business to cover salaries. Furthermore, some large state-owned enterprises in Shanghai are struggling to receive funding from the State-Owned Assets Supervision and Administration Commission and are often left with insufficient funds. So, where is Shanghai's annual fiscal surplus going? It's being siphoned off elsewhere. Coastal residents should not stay complacent. The decline in the coastal economy is unavoidable and it will ultimately affect everyone. The third plenary session also addressed tax system reforms, and one statement is particularly concerning. It mentioned the need to standardize local regulations for attracting investment, enforce legal tax practices, and strictly prohibit illegal or non-compliant policy benefits. Some coastal cities are already pressuring companies to return previously granted tax incentives. This implies that the central government may view past tax benefits given by local governments as problematic and is now labeling them as illegal or non-compliant to compel local authorities to recover these incentives. In the end, the central government focus is on maximizing revenue without considering the devastating effects that fines and closures of businesses may have on local economies and employment rates. This approach fits the Communist Party's style perfectly. The tax authorities are solely focused on revenue collection and are not concerned with economic development. They pursue their goals without regard for the broader economic or social impact. Their primary concern is achieving their own targets and delivering results to the central leadership, regardless of the harm caused to the economy or people's livelihoods. To assist local governments in boosting their fiscal revenue, the central government has issued two policy directives. The first policy directive is to remove the household registration restrictions for Social Security in the city where one works. This means that you can now pay Social Security in any city where you work, regardless of your residency status, and the freelance workers can also contribute. Benefits such as unemployment benefit, work-related injury benefit, and maternity benefits, which were previously inaccessible, are now available. While this may seem to benefit people's livelihood, it is actually intended to boost Social Security revenue for local governments by attracting more migrant workers to urban areas and addressing the shortfall in Social Security funds. Given the current trend in China's social security system, young people who contribute may find that they won't be able to recover their own contributions by the time they retire in 30 years. This is the first revenue-boosting measure from the central government. The second policy directive is examine merging construction, education, and other taxes into a local surcharge and authorize local governments to set their own tax rates. This essentially gives local government the power to impose additional taxes on residents. The specific tax categories are less significant than the ability of local authorities to set their own rates. In areas where local finances are nearly depleted and central transfer payments are delayed, this policy offers a significant opportunity for local governments to increase the tax burden on their citizens legally. Essentially, the central government is tacitly allowing local governments to impose higher taxes under the pretense of legal authority. The official communique from the Third Plenary Session seems to focus on enhancing people's livelihoods and serving the public. However, it lacks significant reform for addressing the public's pressing needs. There are no plans to reduce the burden on citizens or increase their income. Instead, the emphasis is on increasing fiscal revenue, raising taxes on the public, and pressuring private enterprises. It's no surprise that the A-share market responded with a decline, reflecting investors' disappointment with the communique. I believe China is now in the garbage time of Communist Party rule, where no significant reforms are likely to emerge. After the party has fully exploited the coastal regions and driven private enterprises to bankruptcy, widespread poverty could become a reality. Therefore, it's important not to expect any meaningful reforms or genuine concerns for public welfare from the Communist Party. The Chinese people will have to rely on their own efforts for survival rather than waiting for a savior. One can only wonder how long this period of garbage time will continue. Thank you for watching. Please like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. Just click the subscribe button right here. I'll see you again shortly. Until then, be well.